G'day folks, today I thought I'd take you through my AFL Draft tier list. So this is current as at August 2022. So what I've done, I haven't included an order, but for my update in November, I will actually order them 1 through 50 or 1 through 60, depending on how many names I include. So, but for the purposes of this, you've really got the tiers. So I've got here the first 6. So Will Ashcroft, you've got Aaron Cadman, Matthias Filippo, Harry Sheezel, Elijah Saddis, and George Wardlaw. So for me, they're the top 6 picks, and this is why. So with an Ashcroft, well, he's going pick 1. We all know that, and he'll get matched by Brisbane. So that won't be a problem. As a father-son, he'll be great, and honestly, from year 1, he can be, potentially, depending on whether Jared Lyons has a better year, he could actually be Brisbane's second-best midfielder next year. And I fully expect an Ashcroft to match the numbers of a Nick Dacos from this past year. So, yeah, based on that, it's a pretty early pick, but he should be next year's rising star. Most immediate game in the draft. When he's been playing in the VFL for Brisbane, he's been averaging 29 disposals. So, just insane stuff. He's one of those guys where he can go for 40 disposals. He'll get 20 contested, and on half of those sort of touches, he'll be going on a burst for 5 to 15 meters. So, it's not just that he finds a lot of the ball and wins a lot of it, but you've got that burst of speed as well that breaks games open. So that's why Ashcroft is widely acknowledged as the likely pick 1 and the deserved pick 1 at that. So we're looking at a potential top 5 in the competition midfielder, and one who is very, very high probability to be that perennial All-Australian contender at least. So that's what you're looking at with an Ashcroft, and yeah, basically Brisbane fans get excited because you're getting a ripper here. So we'll have to see for September, of course, if he maintains his number 1 spot on my draft board. So Aaron Cadman. So best key forward in the draft with separation, substantial separation. So what we've got here is a key forward who can really do it all. So he can push up the field, find a lot of it, hit the scoreboard in bunches, strong mark, good at ground level, wins it contested, does it all. So you've got a really good one in a Cadman. If I had to have any reservation at all, he can be at times inaccurate in front of goal, but yeah, look, that can be worked on, and otherwise absolute terrific all-round talent. So, and really, you've got the rate of development, you've got the performance, and you've got the points of difference. So, basically, with a Cadman, he's the complete package and a very clear top key forward and top key position player in general in this draft. So with a Filippo, for me, in terms of that combination of mid-forward craft, it's as good as anyone, and for me, he has the highest ceiling in this draft. So he could be the Bontempelli of this draft, and I don't think that's an over-exaggeration. So they're both, if you compare them both from their respective draft years, you've got the same height, they're both December birthdays. Filippo's actually doing more than Bont was at the same age and stage. So he's an absolute ripper. So he's one where he wins a high percentage of it contested. So he could get, let's call it 23 disposals, and he could win 16 contested potentially in that sort of game on his day. So he's just very high impact per possession, strong ball winner, but then has the burst from the contest, really good skills, can go forward, take a grab, hits the scoreboard in bunches. So with a Filippo, he's an absolute ripper, and he's someone where if I had the very top pick, he'd be someone where I'd be very, very interested in moving down the draft to still get Filippo, who even if I had an earlier pick, I'd take. And then that would be a method where maybe I can pick up another player or another pick or improve, maybe move up in another spot in the draft. So they're the sort of things I'd be looking at if I had an early pick this year, because I just believe in his talent that much, assuming he remains healthy, assuming he goes to a good situation and a club that actually knows how to develop him. So they're the disclaimers you get with every prospect at the end of the day. But if he goes to a reasonable club that can develop talent, well, watch out. This guy could be one of the absolute superstars from this draft, and he could contend with an Ashcroft for being the best out of this draft. So yeah, watch out for Filippo, because no one's that I'm aware of has him in their top 5. He's usually on most draft boards that I'm aware of rated more around that sort of 10 mark thereabouts. So yeah, if I had a pick in that sort of 6 to 10 range, that's what I'd be really locking in on and trading for in this draft. Sheasel, for me, he's the most talented forward in this draft, but you've got the bonus of he can actually play through the midfield as well. So as a midfielder, wins it contested, has some evasion, really good skills, has the vision. So everything he does in there is class. But then as a forward, you've got the strong marking, great at ground level, has the goal sense, sets up teammates inside 50. So you're looking at a really sensational talent here. So, and when I go through all these names, well, obviously with sort of how I'm going on about each of these players, you can really tell that they deserve to be in this top bracket and they're there for a reason. So with an Elijah, well, look, he's missed most of the season, but he's been terrific when he's been there. Where early in the year, he was getting his 38 touches and he's even returned and he's still getting those same numbers. And he's one where he's got an incredible burst of speed, and whenever there's a loose ball to win, he's first to the ball. So that's really exciting. So out of this group, he's the best in terms of he's the most balanced midfielder. So he can play inside, but he's also great on the outside. So he might actually find a home one day on the wing. That could possibly be his spot, given he's got the loose ball winning, but then he's got that absolute insane burst of speed. So they're the things to get excited about with an Elijah. But yeah, he'll go for his 38 touches. He'll get his 15, 16 contested possessions. So it's not like he can't win his own ball, but he's not necessarily the pure stoppage player, I would say, of an Ashcroft or a Filippo, where they're genuine first possession winners. With a Satis, it's more like when the ball gets loose, he's first to the ball, rather than being that hard sort of ball-winning type. So that's what makes me think maybe his future could be on a wing, but certainly he can play through the midfield. So yeah, he's one certainly to be very excited about. And you'll see these are all alphabetical. So there's no sort of hints as to, well, Ashcroft is number 1, and you've got a Wardlaw who's number 6 out of this group. It's not working like that. It's just simply these are all alphabetically listed just to demonstrate, of course, the tier they belong in. And with a Wardlaw, so he's one where, a bit like a Satis, he was there early in the year, but yeah, got injured, missed a whole chunk of the year. He's missed the under-18 champs, and now he's out for the year. So done his hamstring again, so that's a real bummer with a Wardlaw. It'd be great to have seen him again, but yeah, with him, look, he doesn't have necessarily the numbers of a Satis or an Ashcroft, but he wins a lot of it contested, and he's a lot more of that sort of high impact per possession mid. So strong ball winning mid, has the power through there, so very exciting player. And there's a lot of people out there who, particularly early in the year, but even still now, there's a few that would even say he's competitive with Ashcroft and really deserves consideration with pick 1. For me, I consider that overboard, and I've never had Wardlaw in that number 1 conversation. For me personally, I was always at the start of the year very pro Ashcroft, and then I saw Filippo just really continue to build on his really good play from last year, and thought, oh gee, this guy might be the one. So, but then I've sort of since shifted back to Ashcroft as the top player. So, just generally, there's some of the things going through my mind with some of the prospects, but I will speed this up, given this will be quite a lengthy video if I go into this amount of detail on everyone. So from the 7 to 12 bracket, so Buslinger, so he's the best key defender in the draft, really good interceptor, good skills, capable enough one-on-one, though still developing. So yeah, he's looking like a good prospect, but yeah, he's gone in for season-ending surgery, so he's out for the year. Played a couple of under-18 champs games for WA, but then gave it away, knowing that, well, they weren't contending to win it all, so played it safe, and that's understandable, but he's still going to be a first-round pick at the end of the day, and should still be the first key defender picked. So, yep, Jai Clark, he's one, and this might almost give you a bit of a hint with my what will be my September rankings, but Clark, I could almost make a case that he could be in this 1 to 6 group. What I like with Clark is not only is he a really good midfielder, but he's actually really good forward of centre too. So one of those balanced all-round midfielders where he can win it inside, good skills, incredibly strong mark, plays a lot taller than his height. So when you catch him forward of centre, he's a real marking presence and can cause problems. But then at ground level, well, he's got that ground ball winning, just a natural at ground level, can hit the scoreboard as well. So I think that forward craft is something that could actually develop more into his game, even if he hasn't necessarily had those opportunities this year. So I think he can be maybe that Luke Parker equivalent in this draft. So although I don't necessarily think Clark will be the best player in this draft, I think as with a Parker, well, he'll be in he'll be that clear top 10 in draft player and could be a top 5 player at the end of the day. And even though he doesn't necessarily have that ceiling, he's going to be up there and he's going to be really sensational. So Bailey Humphrey, what he's done since his return from injury, absolutely sensational. Just going off, he had that 4-goal, 5-behind game with 30-odd touches as a sensational return. And even since, he's really sort of continued playing really good footy. So here's a problem where it's just forward of centre. You can't stop him in terms of that sort of medium marking presence. But then he's got that sort of ball-winning capability as well. So he has the potential as well to become that more midfielder in the future as well. So, he's certainly one to watch and could now be a top 10 pick potentially. So, watch out for him. Henry Hustwaite, so for a 194 type, really strong ball-winning midfielder, great first possession winner, dishes off well. Really that sort of later bloomer, so he could be that Patrick Cripps-esque equivalent in this draft. Not saying he's going to be Patrick Cripps, but if things went really well, that's the sort of trajectory that a Hustwaite could plausibly follow. So he's the sort of higher risk, higher reward player in this range and might even have the highest upside of this group. So he's one that I'm certainly very excited about, even if he is probably more of a, I don't know, he'll certainly go 10. He looks like he'll go sort of 10 and beyond. So he could be a 10 to 25 for a sort of quick sort of range on where a Hustwaite will probably land. And then you've got a Cam Mackenzie. So along with Ashcroft for Sandringham, and same for Vic Metro as well, he's just been an incredible 1-2 punch where you'll have one winning it, they'll dish out to the other who's already on the run moving and knows that they'll sort of be the target. So it's been great to watch him all year, and he's really consistently developed and is one where there's no sort of meaningful difference between his best and worst games. Really consistent performer. So he's got the contested ball winning, but equally he can be a receiver. Generates quite a bit of run, really good skills. So a really good all-round sort of piece there. And may have some additional versatility as well that might be a teeny bit untapped at this stage, even though he's more, at this point in time, a really good midfielder. So that might be something that may be explored early days if he can't get midfield minutes for the club he starts out at. And then you've got the 13 to 29 group. So what I've done is those that were, I'll get rid of this so it gets rid of the blur. What I'll do is, so these that are in bold, they're players that in my August rankings were outside of my top 20, whereas those that are not bolded, well, they're the ones that were inside my top 20. So they're in that sort of 13 to 20 range. For September, at this stage, and it's still another week until I release my September power rankings for ESPN, but at this stage, I'm leaning towards 3 of the non-bolded players dropping out of the top 20, and then 3 of the bolded players making it in. So that's at this stage. It could change. It could be 2 out, 2 in. Not sure. We'll have to see. It's cutting it fine because this is a range where I'm finding it quite even. There's a few that do stand out sort of at the tip of the range who I can't imagine I'll be moving, but there is potential for movement within this range. So Jackson Binns, so really high-level outside accumulator, runs all day, but he's someone where you can put him across half forward and he's going to hit the scoreboard as well. So a really prolific piece there. And yeah, he's someone where he looks like he's probably going to go second round. Particularly through the under-18 champs, he was just racking it up like mad. I think one of his games he had about 38 disposals or something silly. So really high-end accumulator, but hits the scoreboard as well on top of that. So that's always exciting. Charlie Clark, so really good forward. So has the speed, has the crumbing, applies the pressure. So all the good stuff. Then he can play further afield as well. You can push him into the midfield. You could probably put him across halfback if you wanted. Alwyn Davey Jr., so Essendon and right here have a father-son with his father playing the 100 games. So, and with an Alwyn, I'd actually say he plays more like Aaron did. So you've got the pressure, but you've also got the offensive gifts as well. So he's got the ground level craft, moves so well with ball in hand, has the skills. He just has all the tricks that you look for. So he's someone where certainly he could be one of those in the mix for the top 20 who I'll have to consider. So I believe I have had him previously inside my top 20, but he's one where he's either in or on that edge. So that'll certainly be something to watch. And with an Essendon, they'll really have to consider what they do with their second pick. My instinct would say at this stage, well, they may have to consider moving it because a bid for Davey might come in before their second pick. He's just playing that sort of level of footy. So something to be aware of for Essendon fans. With an Adam D'Aloia, well, absolute contested ball. So in terms of contested ball winning, tackling, just all those competitive components, this guy's as good as pretty well anyone in the pool. So he's in the conversation with an Ashcroft almost in those respects. So just really solid. You can play him against anyone. He's going to dominate. Was great last year. Great again this year. Just maybe doesn't have the tricks of a lot of the other players, which is why he won't widely be viewed as a top 20 pick. But I think he's one of those really solid ones where he could blow out on draft day into that sort of 30 to 50 range possibly, I think would be realistically where he probably more likely than not lands. But just to give a rough estimate, but he's one where I think if he does, well, he'll actually outperform that draft pick by quite a considerable margin. Just with those who are those high-level contested ballers, more often than not, when you really look at those who have those gifts, they're the ones that more often than not translate from later picks than they really should be going. So Blake Drury, here's another where just really talented, very quick, really good forward, but again, you could play him sort of whether it's across halfback, wing. You've got quite a bit of optionality there as well, but very talented forward. So there's really a lot of these where they're great forwards, but you could also potentially push them up the field. So you've got your Clark, you've got your Davey, you've got your Drury. So there's a few just in a few picks. You've got your Bins as well. He can play forward. And then Braden George. So he's mostly a forward. And again, he could potentially push up as well. So unfortunately on the weekend had the season-ending ACL. So that's a real shame given that so much of the season was already missed with injury. So he was one where he played early in the year, made a return, but yeah, it's an unfortunate way to see his season end. And hopefully we get to see him sort of play next year. But he's one where he's still, of course, going to get drafted. But we'll have to see where. Maybe, is he still a first rounder? That'll be the question that the recruiters will be asking. But he's one where in terms of the attributes, he's one where it's just like, yeah, he's got it. So he could be that Dangerfield-esque almost in this draft where he's got the contested ball winning, he's got the power. Aerially, he's phenomenal, and it was actually on a leaping marking attempt that he went down with the ACL, which is a shame. But yeah, he's just really an excitement packet. But the reservation for me, at least this year, has been, well, his high impact per possession, and he's capable as a forward, and he's hitting the scoreboard, which is great. But he hasn't shown that he can play through the midfield and that he can rack up enough of the footy. So he'll have games where he's going sub 10 disposals, which just isn't enough, and he's averaging sort of around that probably 9 mark on the season anyway. So it's just not quite enough production. So he's one where I'll have to think about, well, does he stay inside my top 20? Not sure, but he is certainly, for me, if he does drop out of the top 20, in that 13 to 29 range. Just on talent, he's one where if he develops well and if his body comes good, well, this guy could really be a problem. But we'll have to sort of see him find more of the footy, which is why, even though some may have had him around, I don't know, maybe that 10 mark at stages, I felt, given he hasn't really produced on that level, that I could really justify that, as good as his capabilities are. And with a Reuben Gibney, or Ginby, he was really good as an interceptor at Waffle League level early in the year. He showed those signs. Even though he wasn't sort of finding a heap of it, he was playing his role, so that's what you want. But then during the under-18 championships, that's when he really broke out. So he transitioned to become a midfielder and was the most consistent player by far for Western Australia through there. So just that sort of bigger-bodied, taller sort of ball-winning type, distributes well, has a little bit of power to him as well, capable mark. So there's a few things there. Just has that sort of element of competitiveness. So there's some that have sort of said, well, is he a top 15 pick? So plausible that he is. I'm sort of fairly comfortable having him sort of around that 20 mark, maybe a little bit inside my top 20. I think that's perfectly fine, but yeah, certainly around that 10 mark, there's others that for me just outclass him and have higher end performances on the board. So whereas with a Ginbey, it's a bit more speculative, relatively speaking. So and if I compare under 18 champs to under 18 champs, there are other mids who are better, even if a Ginbey was the most consistent for Western Australia over those weeks. And his return to Waffle League levels, well, I think he's just played the one game since returning, and he was pretty reasonable there. And yeah, so we'll have to see. But yeah, he's projecting certainly as a mid, even if he does have that versatility to play behind the ball. Lewis Hayes, so he's one where I've really been red hot on him all year, and I suspect over the coming sort of weeks and months, he'll be generating a few more fans, potentially. So he could be a late first round contender, probably goes second round for a very quick feel as to his range. But he's one where I've been solid for a number of months now on, yeah, this guy's a clear first rounder. Even just in the lead up to the under 18 champs, it was going great guns, developing well, has the late year birthday, but great interceptor, uses it really well, finds a heap of the footy behind the ball. He'll still need to develop physically and get stronger one-on-one, but yeah, he still looks good to me. I think he'll be a really good piece. Elijah Hewitt, he's a mid that I had really high hopes for coming into the year, just seeing particularly what he did at the very back end of the year, in big games dominating, seeing him in the Waffle Colts Grand Final, seeing him for WA against SA in that under-17 match, phenomenal. Really liked his game, but hasn't really stepped up this year. He's been playing Waffle League level, hasn't dominated there. He's been able to fit in without dominating. And then during the under-18 champs, had the big first up match, and then otherwise, look, he was still finding the footy, still winning it contested, but a lot of the ball was just sort of in the back half. He was getting it, and I just wasn't feeling the impact from him. So that's why we've really seen the big drop from an Elijah Hewitt on this draft board. But yeah, look, still like him as a prospect, still has the attributes, has the contested ball winning capabilities, so they're the things I'm liking. And he's one where if he starts finding the ball more forward of centre, that's when he's going to be a really influential player, because he's got the ball winning, he's got the burst, he can finish, and if he's got the time and space and confidence up, he can hit those forward 50 targets. So yeah, certainly a piece with the potential to be really good in the right situation if developed well. So certainly watch out for him on draft day. Oliver Holland, so younger brother of Elijah, they're different players. So with an Oliver, he's an incredible endurance athlete, and he's got that sort of inside-outside capability, so he can do a bit of both. His last under-18 champs game was the best he's played this year, and then sort of in the latter part of the year as well, I've been just sort of continuing on since the under-18 champs. I've felt that he's been going pretty well. So he's one who's been moving up my draft board, and yeah, I think he's probably a first-round pick. I don't believe he's a top 10 pick necessarily, but I think he's probably going first round would be my guess at this stage. And yeah, I'm sort of coming around to his play, and I think probably long term on a wing is probably where he'll one day settle and be, again, really good, because he's got the contested ability, finds a heap of it, runs all day, works hard defensively. So yeah, there's a lot to like, and he can use it reasonably well as well, but you've got the run. So you've got sort of the tools that you want there. And performance as well, importantly. Ollie Hotten, so again, you've got another of these sort of forward mids. So high leaping, really quick, strong mark, but then can push through the midfield, find a fair bit of it, win it contested, importantly. So yeah, he's looking like a good piece. So here's one where he could be in contention for the top 20, and if he does miss out, it won't be by many places. So like him quite a bit. Matthew Jefferson, there's a lot of hype around him this year, and he's widely viewed as probably that second best of the key forwards in this draft. But for me, I actually prefer Keeler to a Jefferson. But with a Jefferson, this is the special sauce with him. So it's one where he doesn't need a lot of the footy, but he'll hit the scoreboard in absolute bunches. So he's one where he could have 10 kicks and he could kick 7 goals. So they're the sort of performances you can get from a Jefferson. And he reminds me a bit of a Cam McCarthy, actually, former GWS Giant, and I think he had a brief stint for Freo as well. But yeah, look, he's one where just really talented, really good mark, just, yeah, reads it so well, high leaper, good on the lead, reads the drop of the ball to perfection. So, yeah, look, with the Jefferson, he can certainly play, certainly very talented. But for me, I find that he's probably lacking in the other areas for me to feel convinced that he's necessarily someone that I would fit into my top 20. So I feel comfortable with him 13 to 29, but to have him higher, I'd want his ground level craft to be a lot better, to find a lot easier ball, to push up the field more, get more involved. So you've got the pressure. So they're the sort of things you need a lot more of. And yeah, it's just, for me, he's not always necessarily there and really performing to the level that I want. So he's got key forward talent, but does he have a game that can convert to be a successful key forward at AFL level? I'm not entirely convinced, but he could. With a Jefferson, one thing that's probably intrigued me quite a bit is how he might look as a key defender. So, and look, in one-on-ones, he's been okay enough, even though he's got quite a lean build. But for me, what stands out with Jefferson again is what he can do aerially. So strong mark, reads it so well, can jump out of the gym. So and he's got the speed as well. So you're not really, as a key forward against him, going to get that easy separation if he's attentive to his role as well. So with a Jefferson, I actually project him as a key defender. As a key forward, I'd personally pass, and that's me personally. Other clubs, other analysts would probably, for the most part, disagree, and the vast majority, I'd be suggesting, would disagree with that assessment. But for me, Jefferson, if I was drafting him, it would be as a key defender, just because with his gifts, they're gifts that translate to key defence play. Whereas as a key forward, I don't think he's going to find enough of the footy, won't win enough of the ground ball. He just won't find enough of it easy enough. And I think that'll mean that he'll just have some hugely quiet games if really you stop him on the lead and stop those aerial balls being a factor. Because, yeah, once the ball hits the ground, well, he's not that sort of key forward, and he's not going to find that sort of easy ball or be involved up the field to have an impact otherwise. So, but personal opinion there, others might disagree, and that's totally fine. But yeah, with a Keeler, so I really like him as a key forward, and look, he's athletic enough and tall enough where he can also pinch hit through the ruck as well, but for me, he's a genuine key forward, and one with enormous talent. So in terms of ground level craft, Keeler is incredible at ground level, one touch at times even. So, and terrific athlete as well, so he's got the speed, he's got the leap. Hands overhead could be more consistent at times. He can probably drop a few more than he should, but he pushes up the field, gets involved. Really good during the under-18 champs, and I think even since he's been quite good as well in the Sandful as well. So, yeah, I'm quite optimistic with a Keeler, and he's one where I've had him in and out of my top 20, so he'll be one where I'll have to weigh up, does he return into my top 20? So that's something I'll be looking at there and giving consideration to, depending on how sort of some others go potentially as well. Noah Long. So is another where he fits into that basket of talented both mid and forward. He can rack it up through the midfield, but I've actually found his forward craft to be really good. So he's got the speed, he's got the gifts at ground level, instincts around goals. So he's just another of those where it's just incredible how many of these forward mids there are and mid forwards. So just having that dual position sort of impact capability, it's just, there's so many of them, and that's why so many are sort of fitting into this bracket, because they're proficient in both spots. And usually particularly proficient as forwards in the case of a lot of these. And Harry Rouston, so he's another where he's a GWS Academy, but again, you can play him whether it's a mid, he can play a little bit forward as well, but with a Rouston, I'd say he's more the mid. So he's got the ball winning capabilities, racks it up, but then he can go forward, strong mark, and he can hit the scoreboard. So another really good piece. And the last few weeks he's been playing with Calder, so yeah, and he's been going fairly well as well there. So that's a positive. So that's in the NAB League, of course. Kobe Ryan, so he's been a consistent ball winner all throughout the year. Just racks it up, wins it contested. Had a disappointing under-18 champs, though. It was only his final game that I really sort of felt his impact. So yeah, it's sort of been a case of as others have risen and he hasn't necessarily lived up to expectation. Well, he has dropped a bit. So yeah, but I still like his game and still with the contested capabilities. yeah, I think he could still, and with the performances on the board as well, he could still possibly translate. So here's another a bit like a D. Lawyer, where in that sort of, he could possibly drop into the third round. And if he does, well, he'd represent quite a substantial amount of value there. So he'd be one where if I'm looking at a mid in that range and I don't have the early picks to get a good mid, well, I could look at a Kobe Ryan and maybe he could be that sort of competitive mid that my team might be lacking. Jacob Ryan, yeah, really good sort of intercepting defender. Just racks it up back there, uses it pretty well as well. Had a good under 18 champs. So, yeah, he's one where he fits into this range, and yeah, he's one of the sort of better general defenders overall. Hasn't necessarily shown me that he can play in other spots, but in defense, he's really good. But yeah, medium defender, not key defender. Mitch Sidkowski, yeah, basically really good mid, has the ball winning capabilities, great distributor by hand, and he's got sort of a bit of a burst of speed as well. So you've got quite a few things there. Does have a bit of an inside-outside balance. There's others who are stronger contested ball winners, but then one of the recent weeks, well, he had huge contested numbers, so that was really great to see as well. But yeah, not a number one option through the midfield, but it could certainly be a piece as a midfielder. So I've been pretty happy with him throughout the year, just a really consistent piece. Both under 18 champs and NAB League. And then Casey Voss. So I've got a mature ager. So, and it's not a top 30 unless you've got at least one mature ager. Just for those that sort of insist on not including any mature ages, well, you're just not watching the state leagues enough, basically. And with a Casey Voss, well, he's made the case, even last year, he was highly, highly draftable, and one I was advocating then, but then you pushed to the mid-season draft, and oh gee, this guy, other than a Jai Cully, he was my next guy, and really among sort of others where you'd have a Carmichael, yeah, maybe you can make a case for him, but yeah, look, with a Casey Voss, he belongs on an AFL list, and you can slot him into any team, and he's a best 22 piece. So, and it's not like he's old; he's 21 roughly. So, yeah, and he's been the dominant piece in the sandful, and he's doing it in defence. So, generates a lot of drive by foot, really great user, but then intercepts to a great level, wins his one-on-ones. These are the things you want as a defender, folks. So, yeah, any team best 22. I'm saying that here and now. Any team best 22. So you can pick him up with probably a rookie pick at the end of the day, given everyone passed in the mid-season draft and there doesn't seem to be that genuine interest. And yeah, do that whether it's late, rookie pick. You've got yourself a bargain and someone you can potentially have for 10 years. So yeah, I'm still very, very bullish on Casey Voss because there's no reason that yeah, he shouldn't be drafted because he's playing at an incredible level. So credit to him, deserves to be on an AFL list and as part of best 22. And again, you could slot him into whether it's a Geelong or Brisbane, any team, doesn't matter. Contenders would love him. Okay, so 31 to 50. So, and you'll find here, I've got some mature ages. Why? Because I actually watch state leagues. So I watch the VFL, the Sandful, the Waffle. It's not all about juniors. If you go back across drafts past, you can go back through every draft all the way back through to 2008, and there is at least one over-ager or mature ager who is a clear-cut top 20 player in that draft. I challenge anyone in the comment section below to find a draft from 2009 onwards, which is the period of which that I've personally been covering the drafts and really being quite attentive to the drafts all throughout that period. Well, I challenge you at home to find a single draft where there is no over-ager or no mature ager who is a clear top 20 player from that draft. So, and on Voss, well, on quality, well, I'm projecting him as a clear top 22, best 22 player on any team. So that's why he's there. But there's other players here where I could make very strong cases. And the first one is Angus Baker. So, and he's someone where he's only played a couple of VFL games this year, but he's one where he was dominating in the NEAFL for years. Then he played last year in the VFL, dominated, unsurprisingly. So high-level interceptor, really good user, finds a heap of it. He's just the lock-and-load guy in defence, whereas still in his early to mid-20s. So it's not like he's over the hill or anything. You've still got an extended sort of career ahead of him as that sort of medium-term option. So, yeah, if you're looking for a piece in defence, have no problems taking an Angus Baker. Hopefully he nominates, and hopefully there's some clubs talking to him with genuine interest. The closest that I've heard was Essendon in the mid-season draft last year, and end of season draft may have sort of given him consideration, but otherwise there hasn't really been that much noise, which is really disappointing for someone who has been as good as he has been. And looking at how well mature age defenders in general, I mean to say, have translated to AFL play, well, over the years it's been phenomenal, some of the names we've been getting. Headlined, of course, by Tom Stewart. So, yeah, there's a heap of them out there that can just lock and load, just fit into a best 22. Harry Barnett, probably the best ruckman in the draft he's turned out to be. So, can take a contested grab, wins a high percentage contested, competitive through the ruck, got around the field, can push forward a little bit, provide a bit of a presence. So, for me, he's probably that more developable of all the ruckmen in this draft. So, yeah, if you're looking for one, hopefully he sort of drops into the second round. If he goes first round, I think that's probably a touch early, but second round, very much a viable selection for consideration if you're after that developable ruck in this draft. Kane Bevens, so we're looking at a 192 centimetre ball-winning mid from Western Australia. Look, I found him to be a little quiet during the under-18 championships. I just wasn't feeling his impact. But then you look at what he's been doing in the Waffle Colts, and he's been a really consistent ball-winning mid, finding a heap of it. So, yeah, it's just, I guess, unfortunately, it didn't translate to the under-18 champs, which, if it did, he would have, he could possibly be a little higher on this board. But, look, given that he only barely sort of fits into my top 50, he might even be around that sort of 48, 49, 50 range, just as one of those very last players to fit into this range. But yeah, just obviously based on what he's been doing in the Waffle Colts, he's in there. And look, when you've got that height, you've got the performance behind you, there is that sort of scope potentially, but I'd like to see more impact from him to really rate him more highly and see the probability as greater. Jacob Dawson, so Gold Coast fans might remember him, and unfortunately when he was part of their list, they were mostly misusing him in defence. So whereas, well, what he's been doing in the VFL, he's been the dominant midfielder in the VFL. So, absolute contested ball, strong tackler, just wins a heap of clearances. He's one who you just lock and load, you just fit into a midfielder. You can just slip him in. So, if you're looking for a competitive mid, well, this guy can do it. And again, he's young. He'd be in his early 20s. So, yeah, with the Jacob Dawson, he's a very easy guy where you can just rookie him, plug him into a list, and you've got yourself an instant midfielder right there. So Billy Dowling, so he's been terrific in the Sandful under-18s. But I did find during the under-18 champs, what really frustrated me with his play was just his marking overhead was a bit inconsistent and he wasn't reading the ball all that well. So that was a sort of point of frustration there. But in a recent Sandful under-18 game, and he's been a dominant player all year there, where he'd be racking up his 30 touches and getting his sort of 1 to 2 goals a game. But he had, I think it was something like 40 disposals or something like that, might have even been low 40s, or if not, then it would have been high 30s. But it would have something like low 40s disposals, and he kicked 4 goals and 3 behinds, I believe it was. So, yeah, this guy can rack it up. He runs all day. Uses it fairly well, but he can win it contested, has that sort of inside-outside balance. So, yeah, he's a really good mid, but, yeah, look, just during the under-18 champs, I found wasn't as influential as some of the others, and, yeah, just, I guess, the frustration of seeing him sort of miss some of those marking opportunities. Yeah, it's just, he lacks that sort of one-touch something. There's just something missing for me to have him a little bit higher, but yeah, look, he's one with promise and certainly developable if he sort of irons out those weaknesses, and he could potentially be a piece without being a star. Kobe Burghill, so another sort of ball-winning mid, can even push forward, hit the scoreboard. Yeah, he's a good piece. Probably not the top end of this range, but he's one where I've been able to slip in, where I've just really liked how he's been going in the NAB League. I think is a good piece. Jasper Fletcher, so he's eligible as a Brisbane father-son. And yeah, I think they'll, again, as with an Ashcroft, be matching bids on him. So he has a good outside piece, damaging in terms of ball use, has some speed. But look, he can still find the footy and win it contested, so they're positive signs. But yeah, for me, look, he'll probably go earlier than I'm picking him. So he's looking like a top 30 pick, probably goes around that sort of 20 range to give a very rough early feel. Could even go around 15. There could be some interest around there. So yeah, certainly Brisbane fans, watch out for him. And he has had some good games this year, both NAB League and under 18 champs to an extent, though there were probably a few others that I thought were a little bit stronger in some of those Allies games. Jed Hagen, he's a smaller type, but he's got wheels and he's got the versatility, whether you want to play him, whether it's forward, back, mid. Yeah, he's just going to give you that burst of energy, takes on the game, has the acceleration. So he's an exciting piece. Darcy Jones, here's another WA prospect, absolutely with wheels, where he takes on the game, so that's always really positive, but he finds sort of enough of it as well, which is really good too. So you can play him on the outside, you could have him running off half back, you can play him forward as well, and maybe he could provide some pressure as well. But yeah, I just love Jones taking on the game. So for me, probably across half back would be probably the natural spot for me, where you just want to feed him the ball, just let him run. He's just one of those sorts of talents where he's just got those instincts that want to take on the game. So he's an exciting player. Jacob Constanti, another good forward. So there's a heap of them this year, but yeah, with a Constanti, yeah, look, he provides the pressure, but then he's that sort of goal-kicking option as well. So has the instincts around goal, capable both at ground level and overhead, can push through the midfield too. So yeah, he's a pretty capable piece. Tom McCullen, so really good intercepting defender. So he's that sort of taller type. So very developable, had some good games this year, can take some contested grabs back there too. So yeah, I like his game. Anthony Munkara, so Essendon Next Gen Academy. Hasn't played a lot this year though. Only played the 2 Sandful under 18 games, and he only played 1 or 2 games for the Allies during the champs. So it's just that limited exposure. If he played more, I'd probably rate him top 30. But without that, look, that might be what gives Essendon the opportunity to actually snag this guy. So maybe Essendon have just been sort of playing that game on us to try and sort of drop him down the rankings potentially. So that's something to be aware of. But in terms of talent, athleticism, this guy is really good. So really good forward, high leaper, strong mark, has the talent at ground level, has some speed, provides the pressure. So yeah, good forward. Doesn't have the midfield scope of a lot of the other forwards. But yeah, just as a forward, really good, whether he's in a pocket across half forward. Ethan Phillips. So here we've got another mature ager. So best key defender outside the AFL by far. Just absolute contested marking beast, intercept marking beast, wins his one-on-ones. There's nothing flash about him, but he can play, folks. He can play. So he's not quite as dominant as a Sam Collins was a few years ago in the VFL, but he's the next best thing. So he's a lock and load. Put him in your best 22 key defender. He'd be in his roughly mid-20s, so he's one of those where he's just got that advanced game where you can just put him in at AFL level. So he could be what Sam Skinner possibly should have been this year, and Skinner's regressed awfully this year, and probably as well hasn't quite played the sort of role that he would have liked. But yeah, with a Phillips, he's probably what Skinner should really be doing this year. So yeah, I think Phillips, if anyone's looking for that instant plug-and-play defender, he's the pick, and you can get him as a rookie. You could probably get him through the preseason supplemental period. You just have to talk to him and say, hey, nominate, we want you, and yeah, go get him, would be what I'd be saying there. Taj Rahul, so he's one where he actually wasn't invited to the National Combine. So the only junior on this list that didn't receive an invite, or actually I might have to double check on Scully there as well. But yeah, Rahul wasn't invited, didn't play any under 18 champs. So he's one where he's gone a bit under the radar. I loved what he did last year, and I feel he's been pretty good this year without necessarily meeting the expectations that I had based on, of course, what I saw from him last year. But he provides the pressure, really lively at ground level, good finisher around goal. But yeah, he's just that lively sort of high pressure tackling type who has the skills, has the evasion, has the composure, has the speed. So he's got some tools and you really notice him. He bobs up, has an impact. So again, I would have liked to have seen him during the under-18 champs. So it's a real shame that it didn't come about and he wasn't selected. So, but yeah, like his talent, and for me, he's underrated. Bailey Rogers, so again, I'm looking at the mature ages, and this is a name that I brought forward last year. So mid-20s, but in terms of that sort of mid-forward, instant plug and play, as good as there is outside the AFL. So he can play forward, be that sort of medium marking target, really good skills. So he can set up teammates inside 50, kick his goals, but then you can put him through the midfield, he'll win it, rack it up, again, use it really well, hit those forward 50 targets. Yeah, Rogers is a good piece. So, yeah, it'd be nice to see an AFL club pick him. And again, given he was overlooked last year, no interest during the mid-season draft, well, someone rookie him. You can just get him with a rookie pick, and he can be a best 22 player for a lot of teams. So, yeah. Kelsey Ripstra, really good pressure forward. So he can push up through the midfield, find it as well. But just in terms of that sheer pressure, he's that sort of Castagna type from this draft. So, yeah, he can play that role and play it very nicely. So he could be that sort of role player without being a superstar necessarily. So, and sometimes that's enough for AFL play. Blake Slinslog, so again, going back to one of my favourite mature ages. So a name I brought up last year consistently because he was so good. Missed the first half of this year, but then he's come back, worked his way into the season, and he's looking, again, like a really promising key defender. And guess what? This guy's still young. He's still in his early 20s. He's roughly top of mind a 22-year-old, so or thereabouts. So, yeah, still very young, but he's a ready-to-go plug-and-play key defender. Reads it as well as pretty much anyone I've seen in terms of behind the play. Can drop a few marks here and there, but yeah, just reads it so well. Is going to gobble up those intercept marks, get to the drop of the ball every time. Uses it beautifully from defence, and he can win his one-on-ones, has the speed where guys aren't going to create separation on him. So, yeah, basically he's a really good piece in defence that I'd be extraordinarily happy to draft in as a rookie, where there's just that opportunity. Tom Scully, so started the year on fire. So he was good last year as a key forward too, mind you, but just his first 6 games this year, contested marking beast, hitting the scoreboard at will. But the clamps have since been tightened on him, it's fair to say. So with opposition clubs really sort of being quite cognizant of, wow, this guy's over 2 meters and he's clunking everything. So make sure you watch out for him. So yeah, only got selected for the one under-18 champs game, which was disappointing, but he was pretty well invisible in that game. And then what he's been doing sort of since those early rounds in the Sandful under-18s, he's been all right, but he hasn't been dominant. So, but look, with a later year birthday, when you've got a 200 centimetre plus guy who can take contested marks and hit the scoreboard, well, you've still got a foundation to work with there. So I consider a Tom Scully draftable, and look, late draft, rookie draft, I think he'd represent quite a bit of value. But yeah, look, early on, I wouldn't feel comfortable investing, but in those sort of ranges, I'd feel pretty happy with that and feel like I'm getting some potential value plausibly. Lockheed Sullivan, so Footscray VFL, another of those really good midfielders. And look, he can even push forward. He's got a bit of versatility to him, but has the ball winning, has the skills. Yeah, he's a good piece that, again, I think he could be another of those Footscray VFL guys who maybe the Bulldogs don't necessarily need him given they've got a pretty good midfield, but there could be a club out there that could use him and just sort of insert him into their team, and he'd fit into an AFL midfield seamlessly. He's that sort of component. So, yeah, like his play. And then you've got Boyd Woodcock. So again, another mature ager. Get used to it. So with a Woodcock, well, he's become a really good midfielder this year. He's substantially stepped up from what he was doing in the Sandful last year. For those that were thinking last year, well, yeah, he wasn't quite AFL quality. He deserved to be delisted. I tend to agree, but with that said, what he's been doing in the VFL this year, well, he's been incredible what he's been doing. Winning at contested, tackling, getting forward, hitting the scoreboard. Is that really sort of complete mid who, again, having that forward craft, well, you can rotate in between mid and forward and get really good results. So, if you don't mind someone who's a little bit smaller, and he's still early 20s, so still got a heap of footy in front of him. So I would very happily take a Woodcock as a rookie. I think there'd be substantial value and opportunity in doing that. So yeah, just another AFL quality player of this sort of mature age crop ultimately at the end of the day. And that's my top 50.